بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Alhamdulillah, we begin our lesson tonight by praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for this opportunity for us to continue, and we pray that Allah make this lesson as a reason of benefit and as a reason anyway our sins are forgiven. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us from all difficulties, trials and tribulations, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala answer our prayers and inshallah, and bless us with iman and taqwa and husnul khatima, ameen ya rabbal alameen. In our last lesson in the Aqaid and of Al-Imam Nasafiyyah, we are still in the Muqaddimah of Al-Imam At-Taftazani, and we spoke about the difference between the foundations of Islam and the branches of Islam. So the foundations in English, in Arabic, we call it al-usul, whereas the branches is al-furu'. So the knowledge when it comes to the foundations of this religion of Islam is known as al-Aqeedah, whereas the branches are known as the knowledge of fiqh. So we spoke about this differentiation, and these are the two main knowledges that Al-Imam Taftazani mentioned. And the knowledge of fiqh has its own definition. The knowledge of Aqeedah, knowledge of Kalam, has its own definition, and they are interrelated. That the branch of this knowledge is from the foundations that it goes back to the knowledge of Al-Aqeedah or Al-Kalaam. So inshallah we will go back to our book, and we do a bit of revision inshallah before we continue to the next part. So in our last lesson we are speaking about this aspect, where we spoke a bit about history, where the author was speaking about the Sahaba and the Tabi'in, the early scholars of Islam and the early Muslims. They do not have much issues in during their time to deal with different ideologies within the Islamic faith and outside of Islam in the early stages during the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, especially there were not many disagreements amongst the Muslims due to the presence of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the blessing of this companionship that they have with the Prophet himself. This is what he mentioned: لِصَفَاءِ أَقَائِدِهِمْ بِبَرَكَةِ صَحْبَةِ النَّبِيِّ عَلَيْهِ السَّلَامِ وَقُرْبِ الْعَهْدِ بِزَمَانِهِ, and the fact that they are very near to the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, وَلِقِلَّةِ الْوَقَعِ وَالْإِخْتِلَافَاتِ, where there is little disagreements amongst the Muslims during that time. وَتَمَكُّنِهِمْ مِنَ الْمُرَاجَعَةِ إِلَى الثِّقَاتِ. There is a mistake here for those who have this copy of the book. It is thiqat, yeah. It is thiqat and not saqafat. This is a mistake. There is also a mistake here in spelling. This mustarnina, not mustarnina. This is what you call it. The letters jumble up, so it's mustarnin, and it comes from the word istarna. And just for the sake of some correction. So their ability to go back to the thiqat, and thiqat are scholars who trusted by their knowledge. Mustaghnina an tadwin al-ilmain, they are not in need to gather those knowledges in books in the form of writings, and due to the fact that they have a lot of scholars that were present during their time. And likewise, wa tartibihima abwaban wa fusula, they are not in need to compile these two knowledges, the knowledge of the foundations and knowledge of the branch, as what we mentioned earlier. It goes back to the knowledge of Aqeedah, knowledge of Kalam, and knowledge of Fiqh. So we find, for example, during the time of the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, the knowledge of Aqeedah and knowledge of Fiqh is not compiled yet. It is not any compiled as what we have today. So they inherit that knowledge from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and then goes back to the Tabi'in. And then he mentioned وَتَرْتِيبِ أَبْوَابِ وُصُولًا وَتَقْرِيبِ مَبَاحِثِهِمَا فُرُوعًا وَأُصُولًا. So they are not in need to expand this form of writings, to specifically mentions what are the foundations and what are the branches, ila an hadasatil fitanu bainal muslimin, until there is a trial that occur between the Muslims, wa ghalabal baghi ala a'immatid din, and the leaders of the Muslims were criticized by the coming of all these sects that are deviated from the truth. Wa dhahara ikhtilaful ara wal mailu ila al bid'i wal ahwa, and when people start to incline towards their evil desires, and started to deviate from the straight path. Wa kasaratil fatawa wal waqi'at, and there are many fatwas, issues due to the happenings that occur in many of those cases. Wa ruju'u ila al ulama'i fil muhimmat, and the need to return to the ulama for explanations on those issues. Fashtaghalu, so they begin to busy themselves bin nadari wal istidlali wal ijtihadi wal istinbati. So this is what Imam Taftazani mentioned, and when there is a fitna, and when there is a lot of disagreements and emergence of all these deviant sects within Islam, the scholars now are in need to bring out the proofs of whatever things that they have known. And likewise there is a need to do ijtihad because new cases happening, and istinbat to derive rulings from the sources of the Sharia. Wa tamhid al-qawa'id wal usul, and to establish principles in every field of knowledge, and likewise to explain the foundations of such principles. Wa tartib al-abwab wal fusul, and to arrange them in proper chapters and sub-chapters. Wa taksir al-masaili bi adillatiha, and to bring forth examples of situations and rulings, and together with it comes the evidences by each of those rulings. Wa iradi shubahi wa bi ajwibatiha, and to answer all these questions or queries that has been raised due to all these misconceptions that is happening during those times, and they are in need to bring forth the answers to it. So if you look at what Al-Imam Taftazani is basically mentioned, and when you are living in a society where you are facing such situations, where you have a lot of ideologies, a lot of disagreements, a lot of misconceptions, and it is the goal of the ulama to explain to the Muslims, to explain the truth, to differentiate the falsehood from the truth, and likewise to write books and to arrange them in proper chapters, and to speak about the foundations, and also the what you call it, the principles of such knowledges. So this is the time of Al-Imam Taftazani, and also before the time of Al-Imam Taftazani, and he's speaking about the time of the tabi'in, or the time around that time, the time towards the end of the time of the tabi'in, and towards the time of the tabi'in. And the situation got worse, and if you study any history, you will find many other sects that came after the time of the Salaf, the time of the pious and the predecessors, during the time of the 500 Hijriya, and the time that we are living now in Jama'ah. And if you ponder the words of Al-Imam Taftazani, if you make a comparison between the challenges that they are facing during those time, and the challenges we Muslims are facing during this time, and if you ask the question, what is the state of the emergence of such ideologies, or different ideologies, or new ideologies that are damaging to the belief of the Muslim, and so on and so forth. If you compare our situation and their situation, if Al-Imam Taftazani is speaking about a situation and even before him, situation during his time is much worse than the previous times. He came what you call it after Al-Imam Razali, and during the time of Al-Imam Razali also, and you find Al-Imam Razali and speak a lot about the disagreements that the Muslims were having during his time, and many books were written to rebut certain ideologies. But if you to make the comparison the time of Al-Imam Razali, or the time of Al-Imam Taftazani, or the time of Al-Imam Ibn Hajar, and for example, who came after him, and we compare the time that we are living today, we will find that the time that we are living today, the situation and the ideologies within Islam and outside of Islam, it is far much greater. Challenges is far much greater than what was experienced by our scholars of the past. But the problem is in the past you have ulama, but today we do not have much of those who reach this level of knowledge who is able to explain. But yet you have people who's trying to deviate you from learning such knowledges, whereas we are in need of this knowledge, what you call it, to save ourselves before anybody else, and likewise as an obligation and a responsibility to explain today to the Muslim community about the dangers of such and such things. So by going back into this knowledge, this is what you call it, compulsory upon any Muslims, because the challenges that we are facing is far greater and much more, and the need of this knowledge is far much greater than in any ages that have passed before us. But the sad thing is there are not many people who are propagating this knowledge. So this is another set of challenge that we are experiencing. We pray that Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala bless us with tawfiq and hidayah. Ameen ya rabbal alameen. So basically this is a revision. We spoke about this in our last lesson. So here Imam Tafzani is explaining about some bit about history. So that is why it is important for us to read about history. So when we are studying Aqeedah or Fiqh, we have to read history. During the time of the Prophet ﷺ, after the time of the Prophet ﷺ, what happened during the time of the Tabi'in, during the time of Tabi'in, and those who came after the Tabi'in, until today. So we should have like a general understanding about the cause of history that happens before our time up to the present day. So it is very very crucial, so that we are able to understand what is exactly the situation that we are living in comparison with the situations of other scholars before us. So now what you call it, we will continue to the next part. After that he speaks about the importance of having terminologies, and he said وتقصير المسائل بأدلتها وإيراد الشبه بأجوبتها وتعيين الأوضاع والاصطلاحات. The importance to come forth in terminologies, وتبيين المذاهب والاختلافات, and the formance of these schools of thought, and to pinpoint the differences amongst the Muslims that occur, due to a lot of disagreements that emerged. طيب. So this is going to be our lesson today. The author mentioned وَسَمَّوْا مَا يُفِيدُ مَعْرِفَةَ الْأَحْكَامِ الْعَمَلِيَّةِ عَنْ عَدِلَّتِهَا بِالْفِقْهِ. So now there is a differentiation now. There is a need to differentiate knowledges. So the importance of defining each knowledge by its own definition, so that to differentiate from other knowledges. Because when there is any confusion, then we are in need to define. We are in need to come forth explanations, and to arrange those explanations in what you call it, in order. So he mentioned that the knowledge that speaks about Ahkaam al-Amaliyah. I think last week I spoke about the definition of the knowledge in your fiqh. So again I will repeat the definition in your fiqh is al-ilmu bil ahkami syar'iyyati al-amaliyyati al-muktasabu min adillatiha at-tafsiliyah. This is the definition of the knowledge of fiqh. So the knowledge of fiqh speaks about actions. The knowledge of fiqh it is knowledge that speak about the rulings that are related to the actions of the mukallaf. Al-muktasabu min adillatiha tafsiliyah, and it is derived from specific evidences. Whereas the knowledge of Usool-ul-Fiqh, it is derived from or it is related to evidences that are general. So we have evidences that are specific, and we have evidences that are general. And the difference between specific evidences and general evidences is that general evidences, it is like what you call it, a Qa'ida, or we say it is a concept that can be applied to other situation, whereas specific evidences and we are only speaking about specific rulings. So for example, in fiqh we say prayers is wajib. The dalil behind this obligation is the verse in the Quran. Allah said wa aqimus salah, full stop. This is the one of the dalil to say that the knowledge that prayers is wajib. Whereas the knowledge of Usool-ul-Fiqh speaks about concepts that can be applied. For example, you have the concept of analogy. Whenever you have the illah of a particular thing, then the ruling carries the same. For example, we say that the reason why liquor is prohibited because it intoxicates. So anything that intoxicates carries the ruling of liquor. So if you can bring forth something that intoxicates, it carries the ruling of prohibition. So this is a kind of analogy. So this is what you call it, one of the examples of a general set of evidence. So there is a difference between knowledge of fiqh and knowledge of usul-ul-fiqh. Knowledge of fiqh speaks about evidences that are specific, that it cannot be applied to other situation. But knowledge of usul-ul-fiqh, we are speaking about evidences and concepts and principles. Now principles is the word earlier I wanted to use. These are the principles that can be applied to other situation. Just like we say al-amru yaqtadil wujub. When you have fi'l amr, it brings obligation. So if you look in the Quran, Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, when you find fi'l amr, you can apply this what you call it, this concept where al-amru lil wujub, the command form in the Arabic language, and it brings about obligation. But of course there are conditions that are spoken by the scholars of usul. But here when we speak about dalil ijmali in Arabic, we call it dalil ijmali, a general set of evidences, and it is basically evidences that are based on concepts that can be applied to many other rulings. So it is a principle, whereas knowledge of fiqh they are related to evidences that are specific to the rulings that you are applying. So this is the difference between the knowledge of usul-ul-fiqh and the knowledge of fiqh. And this is what Al-Imam Taftazani is saying. وَسَمَّوْا مَا يُفِيدُ مَعْرِفَةَ الْأَحْكَامِ الْعَمَلِيَّةِ عَنْ أَدِلَّتِهَا بِالْفِقْهِ وَمَعْرِفَةَ أَحْوَالِ الْأَدِلَّةِ إِجْمَالًا فِي إِفَادَتِهَا الْأَحْكَامِ بِأُصُولِ الْفِقْهِ. So this is the difference between the knowledge of fiqh and the knowledge of usul-ul-fiqh. So knowledge of fiqh, there are two things. Number one is amaliyah. It is based on actions and not based on i'tiqad. This is the difference between knowledge of fiqh and knowledge of aqeedah, because knowledge of aqeedah speaks about al-ilmu bil-i'tiqad, or ilmun yuqtadu bihi ala isbat al-aqaa'idi bil-adillatiha al-yaqiniyah. This is the definition of the knowledge of aqeedah. So knowledge of aqeedah speaks about i'tiqad, it is about belief. Knowledge of fiqh speaks about amaliyah, the actions of the mukallaf. So this is the difference between aqeedah and fiqh. So this is point number one. Point number two is that the knowledge of fiqh speaks about the specific evidences, and that's what we mentioned, whereas the knowledge of usul-ul-fiqh speaks about general evidences, and the knowledge of aqeedah is based on evidences that are based on conviction and yaqeen. This is the definition of Ilm-ul-Kalaam or Ilm-ul-Aqeedah. Ilmun yuqtadaru bihi ala isbatil aqaa'id diniyati ala adillatiha at-tafsiliyah. It is adillatiha al-yaqiniyah. It is based on dalil or evidences that are yaqeen, based on conviction, whereas the evidences in the knowledge of fiqh mostly are based on dhanniyah, or it doesn't come to the state of yaqeen. طيب, then he mentioned وَلِأَنَّ عُنْوَانَ مَبَاحِثِهِ كَانَ قَوْلُهُمْ الْكَلَامِ فِي كَذَا وَكَذَا. So now Al-Imam Taftazani, he began to speak about why this knowledge of aqeedah, or this knowledge that we are learning, is called the knowledge of Al-Kalaam. Why the word Al-Kalaam? Why do we call it the Ilm-ul-Kalaam? So before that, I spoke about this knowledge of aqeedah. Sometimes it's called aqeedah, sometimes it is called tawheed, sometimes it is called usuluddin, sometimes it is called Al-Kalaam. So now he's saying why any this knowledge is known as the knowledge of Al-Kalaam. So after we have understood the definition, that the knowledge of Al-Kalaam, and it speaks about i'tiqad, beliefs, and based on yaqeen, based on evidences that are yaqeeniyah. So it is different than the knowledge of fiqh, and it is different than the knowledge of Usool-ul-Fiqh. So I would recommend that all of you who are following, especially who are learning this kitab, and who have completed this Aqeedah Sanusiyyah before it, the commentary of Aqeedah Sanusiyyah, by now you should have these definitions learn them by heart. So number one, the definition of fiqh. Number two, the definition of Usool-ul-Fiqh. Number three is the definition of Ilm-ul-Kalaam or Ilm-ul-Aqeedah. So these three definitions must be at our minds right now, so that we are able to make the differentiation. So from here, Al-Imam Taftazani, now he said that why this knowledge is called Ilm-ul-Kalaam. The first thing he said, لِأَنَّ عُنْوَانَ مَبَاحِثِهِ. If you look here, you can refer to the translations below, no problem. I prefer to go back to the Arabic language, and then inshallah, if we have time, we can also run to the translation. But what is important is at the end of the day, is our understanding towards these explanations. So he mentioned لِأَنَّ عُنْوَانَ مَبَاحِثِهِ, the reason why it is called Ilm-ul-Kalaam, because the title of the discussions in the books that speaks about the topic of Aqeedah. Last time the scholars when they got books they put the title Al-Kalaamu fi kada, Al-Kalaamu fi kada. For example, if they want to speak about sifat and salbiyah, for example, they say Al-Kalaamu fil baqa, Al-Kalaamu fil qidam. So the earlier scholars last time when they got books in Aqeedah, they start off their chapters by speaking about, by putting in the titles as Al-Kalaamu fi kada, Al-Kalaamu fi kada, Al-Kalaam fi Al-Wujud, Al-Kalaam fi Mukhalafatil al-Hawadis, and so on and so forth. So because of that, this knowledge is known as the knowledge of Kalam. So this is one of the reason. Number two, he said وَلِأَنَّ مَسْأَلَةَ الْكَلَامِ كَانَ أَشْهَرَ مَبَاحِثِهِ. Number two, the reason why it is called the knowledge of Al-Kalaam, because the explanations on the Kalam of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, of course Ahl-Sunnah mentioned that Kalam of Allah is an attribute of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, one of the sifat al-ma'ani, and the explanations of Kalam is the most lengthy explanations of all the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, due to differences that were present around this notion or this explanation about the meaning of the Kalam of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And due to that lengthy explanations and many differences amongst the sects within Islam, with the Mu'tazilah, with the Mujassima, and other factions of Islam. So this knowledge is known as the knowledge of Al-Kalaam, because it is the most famous chapters within this knowledge. حتى أن بعض المتغلبة قتل كثيرا من أهل الحق لعدم قولهم بخلق القرآن. Then Al-Imam Taftazani mentioned something that happened in the past, where some of these sects of the Mu'tazilah, when they were given the power in the Khilafah, or in the Islamic governance last time. So they used to kill a lot of the scholars of Ahl-Sunnah. They kill a lot of the scholars of the truth. And this is what he said, حتى أن بعض المتغلبة قتل كثيرا من أهل الحق لعدم قولهم بخلق القرآن. Why do they kill them? Because they are not agreeable by their the divine ideology, to say that the Quran is a creation, that the Quran is makhluk. And this is the ideology of the Mu'tazilah in reality. The Mu'tazilah, they believe that the Quran is a creation, and they enforce people to believe what they believe. So during the time of Al-Ma'mun, and if you read any history, for example, during the early Abbasid period, after the death of Harun al-Rashid, this fitnah appeared. This fitnah appeared, and it was during the time of Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal radiallahu an, and the Mu'tazila, they were given authority as the Mufti and Qadi of the Abbasid Caliph Al-Ma'mun, who is one of the sons of Harun al-Rashid. So during that particular time, it was Ibn Abu Du'ad who was the Qadi during that particular time. So he informed the Khalifa to enforce all Muslims, including the ulama who live in Baghdad and especially in Iraq. All of them has to abide by this ideology, that to anyone who oppose has to be imprisoned and has to face death. So it was an enforcement, and it was what you call it, basically they are enforcing this ideology towards the people. So here Al-Imam Taftazani is speaking about something that happened in history, where a lot of the scholars of Islam were killed, just for the fact that they refused to accept this kind of ideology. So he mentioned قَتَلَ كَثِيرًا مِنْ أَهْلِ الْحَقِّ لِعَدَمِ قَوْلِهِمْ بِخَلْقِ الْقُرْآنِ وَلِأَنَّهُ. Then the third reason, so second reason is about what you call it, the fitna of the Mu'tazila, where the Mu'tazila, because of their enforcement that the Qur'an is makhluk, and the fact that Ahl-Sunnah is saying the Qur'an is Kalam Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that is the reason this knowledge is named as a knowledge of Kalam, because it was a big issue last time about establishing the Kalam of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Qur'an as the Kalam of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we have number one, what you call it, before that I miss something, I miss this part. If you look here, he said, after he make the differentiation between the knowledge of fiqh and the knowledge of Usool-ul-Fiqh, then he say wa ma'rifat al-aqaa'id an adillatiha bil kalam. This is the definition of knowledge of kalam, to understand aqaa'id, the beliefs in Islam, with its evidences, So always when we speak about the differentiation between knowledge of kalam and aqeedah, when we speak about the detail and the difference, and we say the knowledge of kalam, it is a knowledge of aqeedah that is equipped with dalil. It is equipped with dalil, and that dalil is built on dalil of yaqeen. So this is the thing that I miss, just what you call it, so that we don't miss anything. So point number one, the reason why it's called Al-Kalaam, and that's what he mentioned, because last time in the beginning of the chapters, they say Al-Kalaam fi kada. When they speak about the tenets of faith, they use the word Al-Kalaam. Al-Kalaam basically the explanation, in Arabic is called speech or explanation on certain things. So this is point number one. Point number two, because the notion of Al-Kalaam, that is a Kalam of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it is the most lengthy explanation, and the most part where there are a lot of differences amongst the sects within Islam. And then point number three, then he's speaking about the Mu'tazila and the fitna of the Mu'tazila, when they kill a lot of the scholars because of them saying that the Quran is Kalam of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So now we are at number 4. So number 4, he said وَلِأَنَّهُ يُورِثُ قَدْرَةً عَلَى الْكَلَامِ فِي تَحْقِيقِ شَرْعِيَّاتِ. So number 4, he said that those who dwell into this knowledge, they will have this ability to bring forth any evidences and to establish the what you call it, the truth, and to establish the evidences of the Islamic creed based on the teachings of the Sharia. So automatically when a person is put himself always in learning and in this knowledge of Al-Kalaam, knowledge of Aqeedah, and study the evidences and then the differences between the Ahl-Sunnah and the rest of Ahl-Sunnah, naturally what will have he will have an ability to put forth these explanations in establishing the evidences in the Sharia. Wa ilzamil khusum, and he also have the ability to what you call it, to debate and to bring down the person whom he is debating with, by bringing forth any strong evidences that cannot be rebutted. Kal mantiqi lil falsafa. So he gave an example that this knowledge of kalam and Islam, and the knowledge of Aqeedah is like the knowledge of mantiq and falsafa, philosophy and logic. So you find for example, real philosophers, they are people who are equipped with the knowledge of logic, and you cannot imagine for example a person who is a philosopher, but he does not understand any logic. Now it is almost impossible. It is something that very rare to find, that a person can become a philosopher but does not know anything about the knowledge of logic. And why you say it's almost impossible? Because philosophy itself is built upon the principles of logic. The principles of logic are the principles that determine whether an argument is a sound argument or not a sound argument. So the knowledge of philosophy is built upon that basis. So the relation between philosophy and logic is it is an inter-relation, and you cannot separate logic from philosophy. So he gave many of these examples, just like when you speak about the Aqeedah and the evidences behind the Aqeedah. So it is inter-related, because it is in reality it is one. It is considered to be the same knowledge. So we cannot be saying that the knowledge of Kalam is a tool to understand Aqeedah. No, and it doesn't work like that. Knowledge of Kalam is Aqeedah itself, because part of the knowledge of Aqeedah is to understand the dalil, is to understand evidences. When you speak about wujud of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for example, the existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we bring forth dalil, evidences, rational evidences, and likewise evidences from the sacred text. We say Qul huwallahu ahad, Allah who's samad, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is one. And then we bring forth the rational evidences, and as what in last time when we spoke in Aqeedah Sanusiyyah, the evidences behind the existence of God, and the oneness of God, and the what you call it, the Al-Qidam wal Baqa, that God does not have a beginning and does not have an ending, and we bring forth those evidences. So it is a set of knowledge that comprise of evidences, and also the creed itself. So it cannot be separated. وَلِأَنَّهُ أَوَّلُ مَا يَجِبُ مِنَ الْعُلُومِ. The knowledge of Kalam is the first obligation upon a Muslim. It is wajib upon a Muslim to learn the knowledge of Tawheed or Aqeedah or Al-Kalaam, and this is the first obligation, where we do not have any differences amongst the scholars of Islam. You find that all the scholars of Islam, despite all differences that we have, all of them will say that the first obligation upon a Muslim is to understand the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is to understand the existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is to understand about Iman. And this is the first obligation. So when we speak about knowledge of Kalam, knowledge of Aqeedah, we say this is the first obligation. Allati innama tu'lamu wa tuta'allamu bil kalam. So the first obligation that is wajib upon every Muslim to know and to learn, it is a knowledge of Kalam. That is knowledge of Aqeedah. فَأُطْلِقَ هَذَا الْإِسْمُ لِذَلِكَ ثُمَّ خُصَّ بِهِ. And then this particular name Al-Kalaam is being specified to the knowledge of what you call it, the knowledge of belief. وَلَمْ يُطْلَقْ عَلَى غَيْرِهِ تَمْيِيزًا. So this word Al-Kalaam is specifically meant as the knowledge of creed of Islam, the knowledge of Aqeedah. So it becomes something that is specific after we take the general meaning of Al-Kalaam, because general meaning of Al-Kalaam is basically speech, or what you call it, an explanation. But once it becomes what you call it, something that is specified, where it becomes the meaning of the knowledge of Aqeedah, or learning the evidences behind Aqeedah, then it becomes specified as the knowledge of Al-Kalaam, that is the knowledge of beliefs in Islam. وَلِأَنَّهُ إِنَّمَا يَتَحَقَّقُ بِالْمُبَاحَثَةِ وَإِدَارَةِ الْكَلَامِ مِنَ الْجَانِبَيْنِ. And likewise, the reason why it is called Al-Kalaam, because this knowledge we are in need of a lot of research, because when we speak about understanding any evidences any behind the creed any of Islam, the tenets any of faith, and at the same time in explaining any those evidences and rebutting any certain ideologies any that are against the Islamic any beliefs. So it requires any a lot of mubahatha, a lot any of research and a lot any of engagement between two parties. Engagement any between not only any understanding any the Islamic any faith, but also understanding the the ideologies any of the other party, so that we are able to establish the truth and to rebut the falsehood. وغيره قد يتحقق بالتأمل ومطالعة الكتب, and we are this knowledge is innate of ponderance and reading of books. ولأنه أكثر العلوم خلافا ونزاعا, and it is due to the fact that the knowledge of Kalam is the knowledge where there are a lot of differences and and different ideologies that is related to this particular knowledge. فيشتد افتقاره إلى الكلام مع المخالفين, due to the fact that there is a lot of differences and there is a lot of ideologies. So we are in need of al-kalamu ma'al mukhalifin, engagement in terms of discussions with the mukhalifin. And the mukhalifin are the people who are not in agreeable to what we are saying, wa raddi alayhim, and to rebut their ideologies. So when there is a lot of ideologies and a lot of things happening, so the mutakallim the one who is busy himself with the knowledge of al-kalam, so he is in need of this engagement, and not necessarily any engagement in terms of dialogue, but also in the engagement in terms of writing and explanations. So that is why it is named as al-kalam, because al-kalam ma'al mukhalifin, outwardly it is engagement and discussions with the other side, the others who are opposing. وَلِأَنَّهُ لِقُوَّةِ أَدِلَّتِهِ صَارَ كَأَنَّهُ هُوَ الْكَلَامِ, and the fact that the knowledge of Kalam due to the fact that the evidences are profound and strong, then we say in Arabic هَذَا هُوَ الْكَلَامِ, this is the word. So it shows that the strength of the arguments and the explanations of this particular knowledge. كأنه هو الكلام دون ما عداه من العلوم كما يقال للأقوى من الكلامين هذا هو الكلام. Because in the Arabic language, when you have a debate, for example, and you find for example the first arguments are much stronger than the second argument in Arabic, and you say هذا هو الكلام, this is the kalam, meaning this is the truth. So this is one of the reasons why this knowledge is named as the knowledge of al-kalam. وَلِأَنَّهُ لِابْتِنَائِهِ عَلَى الْأَدِلَّةِ الْقَطْعِيَّةِ الْمُؤَيَّدِ أَكْثَرُهَا بِالْأَدِلَّةِ السَّمْعِيَّةِ أَشَدُّ الْعُلُومِ تَأْثِيرًا فِي الْقَلْبِ. And another reason, one of the last reason, Al-Imam Taftazani mentioned the fact that the knowledge of Kalam, knowledge of Kalam, and it speaks about evidences that are based on qat'iyya or yaqeen, based on conviction. And it is also related to the evidences that are sam'iyya. Sam'iyya basically evidences that are in the form of revelation, and that speaks about the unseen, that speaks about the things that is unseen, and how we establish evidences in the obligation to believe on those unseen creed or tenets of faith. So it is the ashaddul ulumi ta'thiran. It is the knowledge that has the most effect in the heart of a human being. وَتَغَلْغُلًا بِهِ فَسُمِّيَ بِالْكَلَامِ مُشْتَقِّ مِنَ الْكَلْمِ وَهُوَ الْجَرْحِ. So the word al-kalam, it comes from the word al-kalam, meaning injury. The reason is that this knowledge of kalam cause a lot of effect to the heart, cause a lot of effect to the heart, to the fact that the evidences are strong and profound, and convinced that a person is affected a lot by this knowledge and these evidences. So that's the reason it is called the knowledge of al-kalam, because one of the meanings of al-kalam comes from the word al-kalm, and that is effect or injury. That again it is about how this knowledge is able to give the effect. So basically these are the reasons. And for those who are following in our WhatsApp groups, If any one of you is hardworking, inshallah, you can put that in point form. Why this knowledge is called the knowledge of Kalam. Number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4. I think Wallahu alam, we have about 9. We have about 9 pointers here. We have about 9 pointers. Type. So you can read the translation. What you call it based and so what I explain. Because without any explanation earlier that I mentioned, and some of you might have difficulty understanding even the translations, because partly is because of the choice of words. But if you understand my explanation, and inshallah there will be no problem in understanding basically what is written. So now we will go on to the next part. So you can read by yourself, no problem. All this is basically what I explained earlier. Then the author speaks about the emergence of the Mu'tazilah. The emergence of the Mu'tazilah. Why suddenly after he speaks about the knowledge of Al-Kalaam, he goes into speaking about a particular sect within the Islamic faith that is called the Mu'tazilah. There is a reason why he specifically mentioned the Mu'tazilah, because it is one of the examples. In reality, there are many. There are many sects, and not only the Mu'tazilah, there are many. We have the Mujassima, we have the Khawarij, we have the Shia, and so on and so forth. But Mu'tazilah is one of them, and the fact that Mu'tazilah, their school of thought is expanded. And at one point of history, as what I mentioned during the time of Ma'mun, one of the sons of Harun al-Rashid, he adopted the ideology of the Mu'tazilah, and he enforced, and it is a problem, he enforced this ideology upon the Muslims, and that becomes the reason where Al-Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal was imprisoned, and he was almost killed because of this fitna, that he negated the what you call it, that the Qur'an is makhluk, because Ahlul Sunnah mentioned the Qur'an is Kalam Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The Qur'an is not considered to be makhluk. All this we mentioned in Aqeedah Sanusiyyah in the last time, and also in Kharidah Bahiyah, and you can refer to some of this explanation, inshallah. When we go back into the text of Aqaid Nasafiyyah again, and we speak about the meaning of Al-Kalaam, and why the Qur'an is the Kalam of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and what is the meaning when we say the Kalam of Allah, the Qur'an is makhluk, and the difference between the pages of the Qur'an, and the meaning of the words behind the words of the Qur'an, and which is qadim and which is not qadim. All these explanations are lengthy. We have mentioned this many times in the previous classes, and those who wants to know about the meaning of the Kalam of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you can go back to those classes. But here we will not go into that. But it is clear for those who have followed that this is one of the main reasons that we differ, Ahlul Sunnah differ with the Mu'tazilah. So now he is going to speak about how the Mu'tazilah came about, and what it is the issues, and some of the issues that they have when it comes to the Islamic creed. So he started off by saying, وَهَذَا هُوَ كَلَامُ الْقُدَمَاءِ وَمُعْدَمُ خِلَافَاتِهِ. Before he goes on to speak about the Mu'tazilah, he said, وَهَذَا هُوَ كَلَامُ الْقُدَمَاءِ. Kalamul Qudama. The word Al-Qudama meaning the early scholars. They're speaking about the early scholars. The early scholars, they are the ones who name this knowledge as knowledge of Al-Kalaam. And the 9 factors behind why this knowledge is known as Ilm-ul-Kalaam are mentioned by the Qudama, by the scholars of the past. وَمُعْظَمُ خِلَافَاتِهِ مِنَ الْفِرَقِ الْإِسْلَامِيَّةِ خُصُوصًا الْمُعْتَزِلَةِ. And most of the differences in the past that occur from the sects within Islam, like the Mu'tazilah, as an example, لِأَنَّهُمْ, because the Mu'tazilah, why he mentioned specifically the Mu'tazilah, because he said the Mu'tazilah, they are the first sect within Islam, أَسَّسُ قَوَاعِدَ الْخِلَافِ. The thing about the Mu'tazilah is that they are a school of thought where they bring forth foundations in their belief. They are not merely disagreements on certain things, in the branches of the tenets of Islam, but they differ with the Ahlul Sunnah in the usul, in the foundations, and they bring forth a new set of foundations which are different the foundations of the Ahlul Sunnah. Lamma warada bihi zahiru sunnah wa jara alayhi jama'atu sahabati radiyallahu ridwanullahi alayhim ajma'in fi babil aqaid. So they came forth with foundations that are different than what the Sahaba had believed. And the belief of the Sahaba basically is the same as the belief of Ahlul Sunnah. So now you have a sect within the Islamic faith that emerge during a point in history, and they bring forth their set of new foundations that are opposing to the foundations that are present in the Ummah. So this is what happened in the early stages with the emergence of the Mu'tazilah. Fi babil Aqaa'id, in the chapter of creed in Islam or belief. Then he mentioned how this come about. What is the first thing that happened, and how this group can emerge. So he spoke about their leader, the one who established these foundations. وَذَلِكَ أَنَّ رَئِيسَهُمْ, and their leader by the name of Wasil ibn Ata. This is a name of a person, and he is one of the students of Al-Imam Hasan al-Basri. Al-Imam Hasan al-Basri, and he is one of the great scholars of Islam, who live in Basra, and Basra is in Iraq. So he is a big alim, scholar, and he will have his classes in the masjid. One of his students by the name of Wasil ibn Ata was following his lesson, but one day decided to break off from his class. Just like for example you have a teacher, and then you have a student that you have been teaching, and then suddenly the teacher, for example, speak about something, the student does not agree. So the student he says to himself, I will not follow this lesson anymore. I will not follow this lesson anymore. And then open up another class of his own to speak about his what you call it, beliefs, or his the things that he wants to propagate. So this is what happened. The author mentioned i'tazala majlis al-Hasan al-Basri. So now we have to pay attention to the word i'tazala. What is the meaning of the word i'tazala? You see, in the Arabic language, i'tazala when you distance off from something. That's why we have the word uzla. In Arabic, we have the word uzla, meaning to be in seclusion, to distance yourself from people. So the word i'tazala meaning ibta'ada 'anil nas, you go away from people. But here i'tazala majlis al-Hasan al-Basri, he goes away from the class. Majlis here meaning class, like a halaqa. He decided to quit attending the class of Al-Hasan al-Basri rahimahullah. Why? What is the reason? He has some unhappiness in him and disagreement with the Imam Hassan. And what is the reason behind this agreement? Because Al-Imam he mentioned, inna murtakib al-kabirati laysa bimu'minin wala kafir. Because Wasil ibn Ata, he believes that if a person commits a major sin, he cannot be considered to be a believer, nor he is a kafir. He cannot be considered to be a believer or disbeliever. Ajib. Imagine a person commits zina, na'udhu. Zina is a kabira. Kabira meaning a major sin. So when a mu'min, meaning a person who believes in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Muslim, he commits zina. So Wasil ibn Ata mentioned, you cannot call this person a believer. So if you cannot call him a believer, is he a disbeliever? No. So he's not a believer and not a disbeliever. So what is he? He is in between. And this one in the Mu'tazilah, their belief, part of their belief is that the one who commit a major sin is considered to be in between the believer and disbeliever. They call it manzilatun baina manzilatain. a station in between two station. The station of belief and station of disbelief. وَيُثْبِتُ الْمَنْزِلَةَ بَيْنَ الْمَنْزِلَتَيْنِ. This is the belief of this person by the name of Wasil ibn Ata. But Al-Imam Hasan al-Basri, when he speak about the one who commit a major sin, he said this is a mu'min. Just like Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah, if a person asks you, a Muslim commits any zina, is he a believer? Is he a Muslim? We say yes, and he is a Muslim. Correct or not? Yani, do you say for example that if a person commits a major sin, that he is out of Islam? Do we say that? We do not say that. Otherwise, in this zaman, what you call it, if we hold on to this belief that a Muslim who commit any major sin is not considered to be a Muslim, how many Muslims out there who are in reality non-Muslims? This is the belief of the Khawarij, another extreme sect within Islam, who believes that those who commit major sin is a non-Muslim. But the Mu'tazila, they are not saying non-Muslim. They are saying there is a station between Iman and Kufr. So he is in between in that particular station. The Ahlul Sunnah is saying that if a person commits a major sin, he is a mu'min, but his Iman is weak. His Iman is weak. But we do not do takfir to him. He is still a Muslim. You cannot be saying that he is an apostate. Clear, inshallah? So this is what Imam Hasan al-Basri was saying in his class. Wasil ibn Ata'in does not agree. Then he left the majlis of Al-Imam Hasan al-Basri. فقال الحسن, Imam Hasan al-Basri said, قد اعتزل عنا. This person, Wasil ibn Ata, has left us. Has go out from us. فَسُمُّوا al-Mu'tazila. So they are named as the Mu'tazila. So the word Mu'tazila comes from the word i'tazala, and because of this particular person, Wasil ibn Ata, who goes away from the class of Hasan al-Basri because of the issue of Murtakibul Kabira. So clear, inshallah. So they are named as the sect of Mu'tazila. So this is how the Mu'tazila emerge. So after that, Wasil ibn Ata, he has any students, and the students, of course, he got books, and the students got books, and they expanded their madhab their school of thought until the time of the sons of Harun al-Rashid. So this is very important in history. If you have time read up the history of the early Abbasids, the Abbasids and the early Abbasids, up all the way up to the time of Harun al-Rashid, and that is the time of Imam Shafi, Imam Ahmad. So after the death of Harun al-Rashid, actually the problem comes after the death of the Caliph Harun al-Rashid, because the sons, the problem is that the sons are affected by this ideology, and what they did was as what I mentioned, they enforced in reality. They enforced the ideology to the Muslims and to the ulama. So there is a great fitna that occurred during the time of Imam Ahmad ibn Ibn Hanbal. But the Mu'tazila, they do not call themselves as Mu'tazila. What do they call themselves? And this is where the author mentioned, وَهُمْ سَمَّوْا أَنفُسَهُمْ أَصْحَابَ الْعَدْلِ وَالتَّوْحِيدِ. So they call themselves as the people of justice and unity. And if you translate Ashabul Adli wa Tawheed, we can translate as the people of justice and unity. And usually deviant sects, they will choose a nice name. No deviant sects, no deviant sect, will choose a name that shows deviancy and so on. And you find their name will be very nice, but that nice name will not be forever. After some time, when they are exposed, then it goes back to the name of what has been given to them. So in the case of the Mu'tazila, the scholars of Ahl-Sunnah name them Mu'tazila, but of course they do not name themselves as the Mu'tazila. They name themselves as Ashabul Adli wa Tawheed, but this name is perished, and nobody nowadays says the Mu'tazila are the Ashabul Adli wa Tawheed. And maybe some of you first time when you come across this name. So usually deviant sects, by the grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they cannot sustain themselves. With the emergence of the ulama within the Ahl-Sunnah, after a period of history, it will go off. Last time we have Karamita, we have the Khawarij, and so on and so forth. But nowadays they are not present as a jama'ah. This is by the grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Usually sects which are deviant, it will go off in history. It emerge in one particular point in history, maybe 80 years, 100 years, maybe 200 years, 300. In the case of Mu'tazilah, in hundreds of years. Then after that, the name is perish, no what you call it, group, is name as Mu'tazilah. And nowadays, you don't find the Mu'tazilah as a name of a group who abide by that definition. But of course, their beliefs is still present. Their beliefs is still present in the minds of some Muslims. So that is why it is important also to learn about some of their arguments, because although they are not present as a sect, but their ideologies are present. Likewise, the Khawarij and the Mujassima. The Khawarij, they don't name themselves as Khawarij. Last time, during the time of Sayyidina Ali bin Abi Talib, the Khawarij are present. But they don't say I am Khawarij. Nobody will have that, what you call it, will be that, come into that situation to say that they are Khawarij. Khawarij meaning someone who goes against the Imam. Someone who go against the Imam. So they name themselves as the people of Tawheed, or the people of the pious predecessors, and so on and so forth. But after some time, they will be exposed, and they will go back into the names that has been given to them. This is the grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then he mentioned لِقَوْلِهِمْ بِوُجُوبِ ثَوَابِ الْمُطِيعِ وَعِقَابِ الْعَاصِي. Why do they name themselves as the people of justice and tawheed? Because they believe that the one who does obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it is compulsory upon Allah to give him the rewards. And it is compulsory upon Allah to punish their disobedient ones. So that is why they say we believe in justice. What is their definition of justice? They are saying that it is wajib upon Allah. It is wajib upon Allah to give rewards and to punish the disobedient. وَنَفْيُ الصِّفَاتِ الْقَدِيمَةِ عَنْهُ. And one of the things of the Mu'tazilah that they believe is that they negate some of the attributes, some of the sifat al-ma'ani that we establish in Ahlul Sunnah. They do not believe such attributes are the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So negating any of the attributes, and also to believe in the aslah, and what you call it, believe in what is good for people, that is wajib upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. All these things we have mentioned in reality in Aqeedah Bahiyya. So we spoke about the ideology of as-salih wal aslah. As-salih wal aslah. This is one of ideology of the Mu'tazilah. They come to a state where they say that it is wajib upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to do what is best for human beings. Whereas Ahlul Sunnah mention Allah can do anything to human beings. Allah can punish the person who is obedient to him, and Allah can put the disobedient into the Jannah if he wants. So there is nothing that can make Allah obligated. But the Mu'tazilah oppose this understanding. So this is one of the things that they believe in, and that's the reason why they name themselves as Ashabul Adli wa Tawheed, the people of justice and what you call it, and unity. And then after that, the author speaks about the debate between Al-Imam Ash'ari and Al-Jubba'i. We do not have time to continue for tonight. But basically, Sheikh Al-Jubba'i is related to Al-Imam Abu Hasan Al-Ash'ari. He married the mother of Al-Imam Abu Hasan Al-Ash'ari, because Al-Imam Abu Hasan Al-Ash'ari, Ali bin Ismail, his father passed away when he was young. So this particular Sheikh of the Mu'tazilah, and he is a Mu'tazili, the Jubba'i, Sheikh Ali Al-Jubba'i, he married the mother of Al-Imam Abu Hasan Al-Ash'ari. So Al-Imam Abu Hasan Al-Ash'ari lived with this particular person, and he was influenced with the ideology of Mu'tazilah. And he learned, and this is his teacher, he learned the ideology of the Mu'tazilah from Sheikh Ali Al-Jubba'i. And then at one point of time, he come to a certain stage where he asks his teacher a few questions, and he is unable to answer him. And this is the point where Al-Imam Abu Hasan Al-Ash'ari moves away from the madhab of Mu'tazilah towards the madhab of Ahlul Sunnah. So Al-Imam Abu Hasan Al-Ash'ari, in the initial stage of his life, is influenced by the Mu'tazilah. by the Mu'tazilah during his time, and the Mu'tazilah was still many, because his age is near to the age of Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal, because Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal passed away about the year 235 in Hijriyah, whereas Al-Imam Abul Hasan 242 afwan. Al-Imam Abul Hasan al-Sharee was born in the year 265, so it's quite near, because the Mu'tazilah during that time has a lot of influence in Iraq. So he lived in the environment where he is surrounded by the teachers of the Mu'tazilah, and one of them is Sheikh Ali Jubai, and one of the teachers of the Mu'tazilah, and one of the prominent scholars of the Mu'tazilah during his time. And then the author will speak about how Al-Imam Abul Hasan al-Sharee is able to remove himself from this ideology when he engaged in certain debates with his teachers, and then after that he has a lot of other debates with the Mu'tazilah, and he became famous for upholding the creed of the Sunnah. And there was a revival during the time of this Imam Al-Imam Abul Hasan al-Sharee, the revival of the creed of the Sunnah, after it was dominated by the Mu'tazilah. And again, this is also one point of important aspect of history, that if you have the time to read about it. So inshallah, because of time, we will have to stop here. I do not know if there is any questions, and it looks like there is no questions. So inshallah, we close this majlis, and we're making dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Allahumma salli wa sallim ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala ali Sayyidina Muhammad wa radha an sahabati ajma'in. Allahumma inna nas'aluka al-'afwa wal-'afiyata wal-mu'afata ad-da'ima fi dini wa dunya wal akhirah. Allahumma inna nas'aluka ridaka wal jannah wa na'udzu bika min sakhatika wan nar. Rabbana atina fid dunya hasanah wa fil akhirati hasanah wa qina 'adzaban nar. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Taqabbalallahu minkum.